Alright, in this unit we're going to be looking at weather fronts, the types of weather conditions that are associated with them, how our weather behaves within the troposphere, and some of those characteristics that you might see are associated with looking at weather forecasts. So let's go ahead and get started. These are the four major types of weather fronts. Here within the U.S. and especially here in Texas, we have the top two are going to be the major ones we deal with. We typically see warm fronts and cold fronts when looking at the weather patterns here in Texas. These are all four types of fronts that we see here in the U.S. The symbols that you see over on the right of the screen are going to be the symbols associated with these fronts when looking at weather maps and weather forecasts when you're viewing these things on the news. Once again, the typical ones that you would see would be the warm and cold. And what they'll do is they'll use these symbols and they'll stretch them across a pattern on the state, and they'll let you see how widespread these fronts might be and which way they might be more moving, whether they be more east northerly or southerly in their trajectory. So let's get a little bit more detail about each front. First of all, the warm front. A warm front is when you have a stabilized cold air mass in a particular region, and then a warm front is going to advance or move in on that cool air mass. Remember how warm air and cool air works. Warm air is less dense, so it is going to lift up and above the cool air mass. As it does this, it's going to ride above and push out that air mass, and as it lifts, it's going to cool and condense, and the water vapor in that warm mass is going to condense. That's how your clouds are going to form, and you can get precipitation or rainy conditions from this type of process. The rain would be out front, in front of that warm front that is moving in, and then behind the warm front you'll have nice clear skies and warm conditions. Now, as these fronts move, our weather is moving from west to east, okay, across the state, across the U.S. It also moves from high pressure to low pressure systems. And then when you're talking about warm and cold fronts, especially when you have a front advancing, there's going to be a change in the pressure, high to low pressure. That change in pressure is going to create wind, and that wind is going to be kind of like a forerunner to these fronts as they move in. All right, a cold front. Now, warm fronts, you get some rainy conditions. Usually, your warm fronts that are going to advance in on a cold body of air is usually going to occur. You're going to see those conditions usually in the fall and winter time. Think about the tilt of the Earth. Think about the overall average temperature of our air during that time is going to be cooler, and so you're talking about an established cold temperature that is that particular time of year in the wintertime, and then you get those advancing warm fronts, and those are the conditions as a result. Whereas typically when you're looking at a cold front, you're talking about you have a warm body of air that has been established for a particular period of time, usually during the spring and summer seasons when the tilt of the Earth is facing, especially here in the U.S., is facing the sun. You get that direct thermal energy. And what is happening is you have this established warm air during the spring and the summer, and you get these cold fronts moving in on occasion. In this case, what's happening is that cold air is dry. It's not carrying any type of humidity, where the warm air that's already here before a cold front moves in does have humidity in it, does have moisture in it. So when these cold fronts move in, these cold bodies of air move in, it's going to push, that polar air is going to push the warm air up, and it's going to cause it to, with all of that accumulated humidity and moisture in the atmosphere, is going to cause it to form these very large thunderclouds. These thunderclouds can, at certain times of the year, they can hold billions of gallons of water. Depending on how big they build, they can build up to 10 miles up into the atmosphere, depending on how large these storms can get. So your more violent storms are going to produce thunder and lightning and strong winds, hail possibly, maybe even create supercells here in the southern plains where our tornadoes come from. These are all going to be part of these violent storms that form when you have this type of front occurring, especially in the spring and the summertime. All right, your occluded front. We don't really deal with occluded fronts just a whole lot here in North Texas, but you can see these across the U.S. in different areas, especially along coastal regions. This is where you have kind of like a triangle effect. You have an already built, established cold area. A smaller warm front is moving in, and then maybe say off the coast or something, a very strong cold front is advancing, and it pushes that it overtakes that warm front, pushes it up, and you get a huge cloud bank or fog bank that develops as a result. Like I said, not just a really big deal here in the U.S., but you can get it in different parts, especially along coastlines when you're looking at these occluded fronts. And then our last type of front that we look at is a stationary front. Now, sometimes you can get these. There are particular times in the year, maybe in the fall, for example, where you have a warm front and a cold front, and they meet, but neither one really has a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of force behind it, a lot of energy, and so they kind of stalemate with each other and they get stuck. And so what you have is these two opposing fronts pushing against each other. This can form some clouds and rain. These conditions can last for multiple days, but you won't have any wind out of this type of system. Whereas those other types of fronts we just looked at, you can get wind advancing ahead of those fronts. This type of front, you won't have any wind. It is a more slow-moving, more stalemated type process, like I mentioned earlier, and you can have these types of conditions, maybe rainy conditions, some light cloud cover for 5, 6, multiple days, depending on how long those hang out.